Hello everyone, I'm DonTheCrown, and today let's talk about the Staff of Sloth for 33 Immortals, which says it's a specialist weapon. Really, this is just another DPS weapon that has a little bit of crowd control built into it. So the normal attack here just kind of will launch a little purple ball out at whatever the marker is here, and this is like a set range weapon. So although this is a ranged weapon, you're not really going to be able to hit things that are very close to you, and you're not going to be able to hit things that are very far from you. Now, this is also kind of strange because although we do have an indicator about how far away we're going to be aiming, where you actually hit varies depending on which direction you aim. So for example here, if I fire up, it's going to be just a little bit past the marker here, which we can kind of see here as we're hitting the dummy at a distance. But if I aim down, it's going to be before the marker. And this will actually be a lot easier to see if I activate one of these things here. So holding down your heavy attack launches 2 attacks. And with this upgrade, it turns them into mines that explode. And so we can see here that both of the mines when aiming up go farther than the mark. However, when I aim down, the marks is where the second one is. So it's closer than the mark is. And kind of the break-even point here is actually about this angle. And so it's kind of a little bit funky. You have to get a little bit used to this. And it does do quite a bit of damage here. I want to talk about 2 specific kind of setups for this. Now, there are a whole bunch of upgrades for this. We talk about also real quick about the right click. The right click is this little purple blast that will apply a debuff here called, this like slows enemies down. And this is based off of the meter that you build up. This builds up over time or when you hit with your attacks. And the more meter you have, the longer the slow is going to last. If you hold down the right click, it will get bigger, but this will not increase the amount of slow or the amount of damage. So we see we hit for 139, and attack again, 133, 136, 133, 133, 139. And so you kind of want to like try to weave this in or just use it to tap mobs really quick. I think that the staff is probably the king of tagging large groups of enemies because you can just blast and hit everything in one big area and kind of keep moving, which is pretty cool. Now for the other upgrades here, Torpor Wave makes it so that that right click is going to go out as a slow moving projectile, which doesn't really make a lot of sense. It's so slow. It just goes very far, which is not very useful. Lethargy makes it so your slow is now a lot stronger, but you don't gain your sloth passively anymore. Outburst makes it so that every few seconds you cast a damaging shockwave around you, dealing high damage to slowed enemies, except it will only deal damage to slowed enemies. And so you kind of have to pay attention to what's going on, and then you can see that it hit for 303, but it takes such a long time for this to proc off. It just takes such a long time for this to proc off that and you have to be basically in melee range for this to hit. So it's kind of very dangerous. I wouldn't really recommend this upgrade either. And this kind of leaves us with our last 3 upgrades, which are going to leave us with 2 different styles of build. Bouncing orbs, first off, makes it so that your orbs now bounce 1 time into small orbs after hitting the ground. And so we can see here that they continue to bounce on. And we basically do 78 and 26. So about 1/3 of the damage. So this is just like 33% more damage, assuming you can hit with both orbs. Against bosses, this is kind of easier to do. Against small single targets, this is mostly going to help you like clear up larger groups of enemies. And then the 2 little upgrades here that I'm going to recommend are either heavy orbs now explode on the ground after a short delay but deal more damage, or which I'll show you here real quick. So you can see heavy orb normally, we fire out, it does like 108, 109 here. And you know, they continue to shoot the bounces as well. But with echoing orbs, what this does instead is it drops 2 little grenades basically on the ground. We can see that the damage is increased quite significantly, like 80-90%. And so this makes it so that heavy attacks are actually kind of worth it on the staff compared to other weapons, because like you're going to be doing about 3 times more damage baseline with your heavy attack. And then if you're using this particular setup, you're going to hit very, very hard. And then the other option, instead of going with echoing orbs, you can go with scattered orbs. So every 2 consecutive light orbs that you throw, you'll throw 1 additional small orb. And this can just lead to you basically having a barrage of orbs flying out here, as you can see, which just looks really crazy. And this actually is really, really great for co-strikes, because every single time that you hit an enemy, it checks to see, hey, did somebody else hit this enemy before me? And we can see here that we're like building up this co-strike really fast, thanks to this random person coming by. And yeah, this really does make it very easy. Also note that there seems to be a little bit of a homing mechanic with the orbs here. You can see that this left click is going over here, as opposed to going kind of like where I would expect it to go. And so that does make it so it's a little bit easier to hit stuff, which is pretty nice. Now, if you combine this with relics such as Preserved Heretic Head, which gives your co-strikes chance to fire missiles, is very nice. If you combine this with the Muddy Apostle Medal, you're going to build up a lot of co-op power, which is pretty good. Now, speaking of co-op, what our co-op does is we will drop down these 3 little nodes here, and it will fire off a slow field to the right. And that slow field does not really do very much damage here. And this thing is called super slow. And so all monsters are within the area hit by super slow get slowed by a huge amount. Basically means that they can't move unless they have some sort of leap, tunnel, or charge ability. And they'll be hit for a small amount of light damage. And so this is not really useful for damage dealing. Please don't drop this directly on top of the boss. Instead, what this is amazing for is stopping enemies in their tracks. Enemies are not really going to be able to move through the super slow. And so if you can hit elites with these, it really allows you to like lock down elites so that your allies can nuke them safely, or like to lock down like large groups of enemies so your allies can nuke them safely, which is pretty good. And so let's talk about these 2 builds here. We do have a little bit of gameplay for you. So this is just me on Lucifer with pretty bad relics, admittedly, just doing the heavy attack build here. And we can see that like it's pretty consistent for me just to hit the 2 big bops here. I don't think that I was running the bounce here as well, but it's very, very easy with the heavy attack build to basically do a good damage combo, which is to basically spam out your heavy orbs and then spam out a right click, because your right click is going to do a lot of damage as well. But you have to kind of like break up your cadence. Likewise, if you, instead of doing the heavy orbs, are doing the scattered orbs here, scattered orbs require that you continue to left click. If you stop left clicking and do a right click, you go back to only shooting 1 orb again and have to stack up, which makes the late click build a lot more dangerous, because you basically want to sit there and face tank things as opposed to like getting out and kind of like dodging stuff around, which makes it very difficult to do like optimal damage here. We can see that I'm just kind of like throwing out my orbs. I have to dodge, and so I lose my orb build up here, but eventually those orbs start going crazy. But once again, I have to dodge in order to keep doing damage. So we go back to doing like a lot less damage because our orbs are all gone, but we can very easily build up the damage again. And I think that both of these builds are pretty viable. I've played both of them in Purgatorio and done pretty okay. I think that you're going to just generally be fine. For the perk setup here, what we're going to be looking for is, as always, Renewal of Dust, just giving us 100% more dust. You'll be putting these points probably into attack or empathy. Really, like, you shouldn't need to put too many points into vitality, even in Purgatorio, because you just need to be careful about like dodging and avoiding the damage. Having extra life isn't going to help you too much in terms of like actually clearing the mechanics, whereas having enough damage to kill stuff before stuff explodes is very important. Imperial Deceptiveness gives you critical hit damage where co-strike counter is above 24. So this is going to give you like basically triple damage on your critical hits as opposed to double damage. And this is just very easy to build up your co-strike counter here. And then I recommend having the increased rarity of relics that you find. It's going to help you find blue or epic rarity relics, which I think are going to be very helpful for you. And then I like Morphology of Justice. This helps you deal more damage while your dust is full. So you generally don't want to take that final level up at the like end of the Ascension battle. Instead, just keep the 25% damage. However, you could go with like Astute Erudite for more co-op powers. Heck, you could even go for Fool's Fate if you just want to do more damage, or even Blissful Farewell could be fine if you're really trying to find specific relics. Now, talking about relics here, it kind of depends on which build you're going to go with, but things like the Altruist Jawbone or Blessed Shades, either of these is going to be fine depending on which build you go with. Obviously, go with the heavy attack one if you're playing the heavy attack. Go with the light attack if you're playing light attack. Getting stuff like Sacrosanct Vertical is going to be very, very good if you're playing the light attack build. It's going to really help you stack up Exposed very, very quickly for the team. Things like Muddy Apostle Metal will help you have your co-op power up all of the time, dropping these clutch slow fields for your allies. A little bit less useful for bosses for most of the parts, but can be some very clutch moments for sure. Lamp of Purifying Flames and Burnt Cincture. I think that these are probably the best like defensive items right now. This gives you a lot of vitality for stacking damage, and then this just gives you a lot of recovery. These are pretty much like, if you just have these two, you're going to feel very, very tanky. And then things like Cruel Harpy or Reliquary Hand, very nice as well. And then up here, I don't really think that there's anything that really stands out as like a must-have beside the Preserved Heretic Head, because you're going to be hitting a ton of Coast Strikes with this particular weapon. I think this is a little bit overtuned for the staff. It does a lot of damage. Those extra shots can just really, really add up very quickly. Definitely hit like 99999 Coast Strike on Lucifer with this particular setup, but it's a little bit hard to do now because people are doing so well in Lucifer. I've had like 30 people surviving, but it's very definitely possible to do that. Also getting stuff like the Clerical Silas or the Cracked Rosary Beads to help you keep those Coast Strike levels up. Very, very good to do as well. And yeah, it's just a pretty fun build. One thing I would kind of recommend is like when you're kind of like learning right off the bat to potentially just go with the heavy setup like so, and then instead of like always spamming your heavy attacks while enemies are moving around, it's okay to kind of like use your left attack and kind of be a little bit inefficient. But when you see like an enemy is gonna be standing still, then you can really lay into them with the whole like mortar setup here, and you're just gonna do a ton of damage and also stun enemies a ton. You can also weave in your right click, which does a lot of damage, and those enemies are going to be slowed as well. And when you drop your Coast Strike skill, enemies are just not going to move at all. And so you can just like lay right into them with tons and tons of damage, which is pretty nice. I don't think that this is as good for damage as the bow or daggers right now. However, you can get quite a bit going if you get the right relic setup and can be very confident in standing still and just nuking. But yeah, that's the guide. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below and come by the stream.